We'll continue now with the chair and administrative liaison training. So most of the boards and commissions, almost all of them, have at least one member of staff that's an administrative liaison. So they usually, they bring a lot of knowledge and history usually, and can help guide the boards and commissions, make sure that they have what they need in order to do their work. So, and they're a good liaison often with the staff also. So wanted to thank you for your ongoing participation this morning, and we'll go ahead and get started. So we're going to talk about running a good meeting, recruitment, review and evaluating, recommendations, annual goals, and task list. And I'll be referring to the best practices document with these slides. For those that want to pull it up online, it's on our website, either under resources or training. We have the best practices document available, and for those in the room, they have it in binders. So with running a good meeting, we'll talk about attendance, conduct, and let me see if we have a slide for each. Attendance, conduct, content, rules, handling disruptions, and facilitation. So in terms of attendance, that's huge, making sure that you have your own members showing up for your meeting is so important. And then also members of the public, providers, staff, anybody that would be interested in behavioral health in the county. So we have some suggestions for reminding members. We do often hear that boards and commissions struggle with this, that they may not be getting quorums. So when that happens, we really encourage the leadership, and the staff can help if they're able as well to remind members. Some people need at least 3 reminders. They need an email, they need another email, maybe texting, especially young people. They tend to use their phones for texting more than they do for emails. Depends on the person. And phone calls, especially for older people, a phone call can be helpful, and a packet, a printed packet sent in the mail can be really helpful as well. I used to be on one of the local boards, and always appreciated getting my packet a few days before the meeting so I could read it. I like to have the printed copy to read. And it was on my counter, so I remembered to go to the meeting too, because I had that reminder sitting right there. Invite people, be intentional about inviting them. And you could even, maybe put out flyers about what topics you're going to be covering in your meetings, and send those out to interested groups. Invite consumer and family member organizations, organizations representing diverse ethnic, cultural, racial populations, advocacy groups, and other county agencies or board, both staff or commission board members. Kaylin, go ahead.
So I, again, new, but in some of the local Facebook groups, like the moms groups, etc., just people within the community, I've seen ask questions about availability of mental health services. And so I thought that would be a really good avenue to invite people to come to our meetings. Is that allowed? I mean, or does it have to be these designated other areas like groups?
Yeah, you can definitely use that to announce your meetings. There's Nextdoor and different types of social media. That's fine, as long as you're not discussing the topics by like Facebook, you know, that would, you could get outside of the Brown Act if you had a quorum of your members that were commenting on a specific topic within your behavioral health board or commission. But if it's just announcing meetings, you know, organizational things is fine. It's fine to invite people that way. That's a great idea. Let's see. And then we also mentioned the folks from school districts, law enforcement, community colleges, and patient rights advocates as well. Each county has what's called a patient's rights advocate, and they are people that they have a contract with the counties to visit the facilities where the behavioral health services are, and they can take any kind of grievances, and they also represent clients at hearings if they have been taken in like through conservatorships. There's a couple questions in the room.
Is this the right way? Warren Cushman, Alameda County. I just want to point out that in some areas, law enforcement tends to get a little dicey. So, you know, I think it's important to think through how that works. There are certain areas in California where folks get triggered the wrong way with regard to law enforcement. So I think we have to, I would say that I think it makes sense to be a little careful with that. Thank you.
Thanks, Warren. Appreciate hearing that. And, you know, and we see in the news a lot of issues around law enforcement in Alameda County. And I think in some of the other larger counties too, it can be actually off-putting for some of the groups when they see officers in uniform at the meetings. But at the same time, we want their involvement, and you know, we want to have them be part of the conversation. So yeah, it's a difficult crosswalk there.
So one of the things I wanted to mention, Christine Hottie from Napa County, is the whole concept of accessibility. I mean, obviously we don't have translators at our meetings, but in sending flyers to some of our community organizations, I had one organization ask, can you have your flyer in Spanish? Sure. So, you know, it's like translating. My first response was translation services are expensive, but I spoke to the county. And so now they will, if I send them the text of our flyer, they'll translate it so I can put out both English and Spanish versions, which at least gives people an opportunity to know what's happening and to come to our meetings if they can understand English. They don't have to speak it, but if they can understand, then that's great. So.
That's great to hear. Thank you.
Oh, one more question in the room.
Oh, is there another? Okay.
Yeah, Sonoma County is getting very much into translation services and very much into partnering with community agencies to produce really good material. When we first started getting into translation in Marin County a long time ago, we realized that dialect is important and that the different kinds of Spanish, the different kinds of every language, you can't just sort of say there's one Philippine, there's one Tagalog, there's one, you know, so you really need to pay attention to that. And we all learned as a result of it.
No, just to kind of reiterate, Benny Benavides from Imperial County, just to kind of reiterate what Warren's concern was too. I've got to agree with Teresa that the fact that you involve law enforcement in the discussion and involving them in really what the problem is, I think does a great task to trying to get you all on the same page, because a lot of times law enforcement really doesn't know what the focus is and their lack of knowledge in the field. So, I mean, attending meetings and sensitizing them to really the concerns and what they have, I think it goes a long ways to that.
Gina Lewis, Alameda County. I would implore people to find out what the threshold languages of their particular county are. And generally, staff has an obligation to translate in those particular languages. And I think we're of the time period where we need to be intentional about advocacy and outreach. So unless we meet people where they are and talk to them in the language that they can understand, we're not servicing them.
One more.
Yeah, one more, Gregory Farren, Sonoma County, and back to law enforcement. And you have to remember that we're making some progress in getting people out of jails early and into community facilities. And those people need our help. So we need to have law enforcement. We just had a facility opened up by the probation department. 30 beds, so those folks need to have support services. They need to be in partnership with us. So law enforcement is a lot more than just, getting folks out of the jail.
One more.
We have one more in the room. I thought, yeah, there's something in the chat. Let me check that.
Hello, Marian Villalba, Napa County. For those of you that are struggling with translations, there is a lot of apps that do transcribe. And I think that would help everybody out when you guys are doing either Zooms or anything. Zoom has, if you buy the executive plan, they do have transcription services will it transcribe everything everybody is saying into that language. So if you guys haven't seen those services do exist.
Thank you. All right, so let's go to the next slide. Oh, we did the conduct already, so I'm going to skip that one. All right, so content for a meeting. The agenda, of course, needs to be thought about before the meeting and posted 72 hours in advance. Usually the executive committee, and then in some counties, it's just the chair. If it's a really small county, we'll work on putting the agenda together. There are some counties where staff really does help quite a bit with the agendas. Oftentimes staff needs to have certain presentations on the agendas in order to have your boards or commissions review things before they can sign off on, their applications for different grants or contracts with the state. And then, and we have an example on our website of an agenda that provides information on it. So people, when they show up at the meeting from the public, they understand how public comment works. And then also it has some information on the teleconferencing requirements as well, because they're so confusing. It's good to remind ourselves, on the boards and commissions, how that works. And speakers who can speak about priorities that are identified by your board and commission members. And of course, the concerns of the public should be influencing what those priorities are. Then also access to services and effectiveness of services. Remember, access doesn't mean that they're effective. So just because you're seeing a large group of people that are accessing services, you might be looking at the breakdown demographically of people that are accessing your behavioral health services. And you can identify which groups may not be accessing at the right levels. You know that you have an engagement issue there. But then if you start looking at the performance information, you'll get also a picture of, for those that are accessing services, are they effective? It's one thing to have services, but making them effective is another thing. And reviewing that is so important. And so having speakers also talk about needs and issues and successes. So, you know, when the chair reaches out to potential speakers, or, you know, if it's other members that are asking people to do presentations, or if it's the staff themselves, it's good for the leadership of the Board of Commissions to ask, you know, them to focus on what are the barriers, what are the challenges you're dealing with. That's good information for you all to know and to help you in making recommendations. But also, what does success look like? You know, when the counties have identified successful programs, you want to see those scaled throughout your counties. So, you know, you need to know what success looks like in order to make recommendations for it. And then housekeeping, keep it limited. You know, we've talked a lot about just, you know, a lot of the technical aspects of meetings and handling this type of thing, but that's not interesting to the public. And that's not the subject of your board or commission. We want you to focus on behavioral health issues during those meetings as much as possible, and just keep any of the housekeeping stuff really limited and outside of the meeting as much as possible, so that it's handled, you know, scheduling things and other, like, even membership recruitment and things like that. That does not need to be topics within your behavioral health meetings usually. I attend a lot of these meetings and I really prefer to listen to the presentations on behavioral health. Gregory?
Yeah, this is Gregory Farron, Sonoma County. This is probably the most important topic today for me, and I'll explain why. Our agendas set up by our exec committee tend to be who do we want to have speak to us? What reports do we want to get as a board as a whole? And the conversations around item 2, speakers' priorities identified by board, access, needs, hardly ever are framed in our board meeting. In other words, getting our board to talk to itself about the issues you're talking about here is difficult. And I'll tell you why I know firsthand what it is. I suggested that I try to get the public to talk to us as much as possible in the public comments and raise issues. But I also suggested that each of the board members somehow need to express to other board members what their concerns are in an open dialogue in the meeting. The county council and everybody and their brother came down on me saying, no, that's a serial conversation. You can't do that. The board members don't have the right to be able to bring up with each other in a meeting what the issues are. And but one of our boards, the Homeless Coalition, broke away from that and put an agenda item that said board concerns. And at the end of the agenda, they open up a discussion among all of them about what their concerns were around homelessness, around housing, around stuff. And it got completely out of hand, and everybody said, well, that was a bad idea. We shouldn't be doing that. We didn't inform the public of any of the topics that anybody was going to be bringing up. It kind of violated lots of spirit of the Brown Act to have an open discussion that wasn't given to the public before and prepared in a way that reports can be when they're attached to an agenda. So I guess my question is, you say speakers can speak about. I understand that a public member can speak about any of these. How does a member of the board raise the questions you're talking about here in a meeting?
All right, so yeah, that is a good question. So what you can do is I think what we see a lot of boards and commissions do is they'll set aside time, usually it's once a year, where they listen to what people care about that are on their board or commission. They make it, maybe they'll call it a retreat, or they'll make it kind of a special meeting where they really just open it up to understanding what everybody's issue is that they really would like the board or commission to be working on. So having a really intentional agenda item around that, and it needs to be open to the public, you know, and listen to the public also on that. So, you know, that's one way. And if you did that at every meeting, you may never get through the meeting. So, right. Yeah, it can be difficult. Right, but you do want to know what your board and commission members care about. And you know, the chair or executive committee members could be reaching out between meetings also, especially when they know certain members, well, if they get a new member, they could be reaching out to them directly and finding out what made them decide to get on the board or commission, what was their interest. And have like coffee with them, or, you know, a conversation by phone, or, you know, have a conversation with them to understand their perspectives and why they care. And then once the board or commission has decided on maybe priority issues, if you've identified an individual that you think really could chair an ad hoc or work group, sit down with them and maybe, you know, even before you appoint them to be the chair of that, sit down with them and have that conversation, because that can agitate them and stir them up to be a leader in that area and do some of the work that needs to be done in order to go more in depth so that you can make a recommendation. Right, yeah, the chair can be helpful with that. Yeah, there's a question online.
One more in the room.
So I have a quick question about agenda items and how things, if a board member thinks that they should be added to the agenda, and especially with the Brown Act, if a board member wants something to be addressed in the agenda, do we reach out to the chair, or, and I assume because of the Brown Act, it's not like we can send an email to everybody on the board about what we think should be added to the agenda. What's kind of that process?
Right, and can you remind me what county you're in?
Santa Cruz. Sorry if I'm asking really dumb questions. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no, I'm just asking because not all the counties have an executive committee. I'm not sure if you have an executive committee that meets once a month, but that's one avenue, is asking the executive committee to consider it as, because usually the executive committee will work on, you know, putting together the agenda for the next board or commission meeting. So that's one avenue, is just asking the asking the executive committee during their meeting. But you could also, you know, email the chair, email the administrative liaison if you don't have the chair's email. You know, just let them know, or you can bring it up. You know, if it's, I think during the meeting, some of the boards and commissions will have an item of, you know, just kind of a debrief, but that can be difficult sometimes, especially if you have some long-winded members. It's hard to get a meeting to adjourn if you have an open-ended discussion on, but, you know, you could also just put on the agenda, or yeah, your chair and executive committee can decide, well, let's put on the agenda a topic at the end of just requested topics for presentations. And that could be on the agendas, or like I was talking about earlier, just once a year, you know, allow your board and commission members to talk about what areas they would like to focus on. And I think maybe it was Christine talked about, you know, using a tool like, you know, putting up a big sheet of paper, writing down what everybody thinks is a priority area of interest, and then voting on it as a board or commission with little stickers. Have 3 stickers per person, 1, 2, and 3, so people can put their top priorities, put stickers there, and then you get an idea of what priorities to focus on for speakers and ad hocs and site visits.
I love that. And that would be something that would even just that action would have to be added to the agenda for one of the meetings, and we'd all have to do that during a meeting, correct?
Right,
Correct.
yeah. Okay. All right, let me look at this.
Lisa?
I'm gonna look in the
Teresa?
chat for a moment and then I'll take your question. Let's go, let's see. All right. Okay, is it appropriate to limit board member response time for comments in the interest of time? I would say yes. You need to do that. You know, you try to set guidelines with your board members and do the best you can. And also as chairs, if you don't want a conversation to continue, don't argue with it. You know, you can just listen and move to the next person, and that helps because then there's not going to be a back and forth. So that can, you know, be a tool also. The easiest way to shut down somebody is to agree with them or just nod your head and move on.
This is JD, Chair for Solano County Behavioral Advisory Board. Piggyback on what y'all said, what best works for us, I put it on the agenda for board member comments and discussions at the end. It's on my agenda every month. And I allow my board members that time for comments and discussions. And if it's something that we need to put on the agenda, I would put me and the supervisor and the director would talk about it and we'll put it on the agenda for the next following month. But I do allow them time to speak and discuss what they went through that month, or is it something, or if it's a success story, or is it something that we need to follow up? I allow them that time before the meeting is over with to discuss what they need to discuss, or just to share with the board. It's not a discussion, you know, but they just share what they want to share, and I give them that time before the meeting is over with. And that's worked best for us, you know, for the past year.
Okay, thanks. Oh, Warren?
Warren Cushman, Alameda County. So I find that this whole conversation is a delicate balance because for me, you know, we want to try to move along. We want to try to, you know, reflect the mission of our advisory board. You know, we want to make sure we have a packed agenda with all the important matters. On the other hand, sometimes things get swept under the rug. Sometimes decisions are made and feelings get hurt and things just get complicated. And so when there's not enough time for folks to interact in some way, things can bubble over and you can have a situation where you know, feelings just get hurt and people get sidetracked. So there is that delicate balance between, you know, too much time and, you know, overrunning the agenda. But on the other hand, not enough time means you get a non-functional board because people's feelings get hurt and then you bubble over into, you know, a problem. So that's what I don't have the answer to that. I'm just saying that there's a delicate balance involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Warren. And I think that we're going to talk about a couple other items that kind of relate to that in a little bit in terms of, you know, I think, let me see, make sure I have. Okay, yeah, we have a slide that kind of talks about when it gets difficult and give you some advice on how to handle that. But let me make sure we get through these other slides first. Okay, so Brown Act. I just wanted to go through a few things, just basics on the Brown Act. And in your best practices guide in the sleeve, we have a printout of a summary, just a Brown Act guide that we've provided with some of the most frequently asked questions and just some of the basics. So the agenda we've talked about, you must follow the agenda. If it's a regular meeting, so most boards and commissions meet the same weekday, like the second Wednesday of the month. and at the same location. So that's a regular meeting. And those must be, the agendas must be posted 72 hours in advance. And they must be for a meeting that is a special meeting, so it's outside of your normal schedule or outside of your normal meeting place, then it must be at least 24 hours in advance that it's posted, but it also should be shared with the media, that there may be local media, newspaper, radio, or TV that asks for that type of information. And so you must provide that to them as well. And then you must follow it. So there are some boards and commissions that still vote at the beginning of every meeting to accept the agenda. That's really redundant because it's already in place. You don't need to approve the agenda. Maybe your board of supervisors does that too. I don't know why, but the agenda should be set and followed. If there's something that happens, like maybe a speaker is delayed and it's going to come late, you know, and the order of the agenda needs to change a little bit, you can do that. You know, oftentimes the easiest way to make a specific change like that is just to say, if there's no objections, we'll have this speaker come, you know, an hour later than we were expecting. And so that agenda item would be shifted on the schedule. Documents must be shared with the public. If they're documents that are within the subject matter of behavioral health, they should be shared with the public as soon as possible if they're shared with a majority of your members. So that means things that have been emailed between meetings with a majority of your members, you know, if they've been provided some information by staff, or maybe members of the public have sent in letters, those should be provided publicly. A lot of times just attaching it to your packet, your agenda packet, is an easy way to do that. If they come in at the last minute, they could be provided, you know, at the office, you know, if they're not ready for the meeting itself, and then put on the website. Meeting notification, I mentioned, and also should say those agendas should be on the local government website. And for most of you, that's the county website. And the easiest way for the public to find it is if you have a behavioral health board or commission page on your behavioral health agency website. And then public comment before or during each item. There are some counties that every year or two I have to remind them before or during, because they tend to want to put it at the end of the agenda. And by that time, the public, you know, they didn't get a chance to discuss anything that was on the agenda. So before, during is the law, that's California law. And then teleconferences. That's where we were talking earlier about this. So this slide talks about teleconferences. Items 1 through 5 is just normal teleconferences are okay for members to participate that way, as long as the agenda is posted at all the teleconference physical locations. And the teleconference location must be posted on the meeting notice and agenda as well. So the address where people are needs to be on the agenda. And then each teleconference location must be accessible to the public, allowing for public comment. And there must be a quorum within the county. So at least a quorum of the members must participate from locations within the county. And then votes by roll call. So if there's even just one member that's participating, by teleconference, you must have roll call votes. And then we'll go through the allowances on the next slide. And these are in place until 2000. Oh, wait, the first one is new. So this one is in place because the Attorney General for California made a ruling recently saying it is okay for people with disabilities, either permanent or temporary, to participate in Brown Act meetings remotely without posting their address for the remote meeting location. So they don't have to they don't have to be accessible. They don't have to provide information on where they're connecting from. Okay, let me go online and then we'll get to the room. Amber?
So, can you, can the person?
We can't hear you. Can you get,
Just a moment.
all right.
Can you hear me now?
Not very well.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, great. Okay. Can you say all those in favor? Say, aye.
If it's a roll call vote, no. You have to ask.
Call out each name?
Yeah, ask out each commissioner.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to double check.
So what county was that?
San Francisco. And
Thank you.
Warren?
Warren Cushman, Alameda County. I've been told by at least one county council on the disability piece that the Attorney General rule is not state law. So there may be some county councils that don't honor it because it's not state law.
And is this on this most recent? It was
Yes,
just,
About
okay,
to hear.
okay,
About to-
all right. So there's some,
There's some wiggle room there, yeah.
okay. There's another
yes.
question. Whoops. I could do this better.
Yeah, I'd like to go back to the public comment just to make a comment about before or during.
Yeah,
You're right. Everybody I know does it just before they vote, but after
Oh.
the whole conversation that's taken place from members.
it's
And
still
so-
during then.
Well, I know, but
Yeah.
so I'm just saying there's a conflict because people in the community, I think, want to hear what you are saying before they comment. People on the board want to hear from the community before they comment. So it's like, who's going first? You know, and I
Right.
just think that, and so and so the default is the worst of both, which is the public doesn't get a chance to comment until just before the vote. And by that time, you pretty much know how the vote's going to go because everybody's already said something. And all you're doing is sort of adding a little, you know, you're doing it wrong, or thank you very much for your votes, which makes public comment in many cases meaningless. I think if it were somehow created where there was a dialogue, it would be great because then you could have actual people on the board go, I just heard from the community and I think I changed my mind on it. Or I'd like to, you know, there's a give and take. In this case, nobody's giving, nobody's taking. Everybody's just sort of saying, well, I'll say what I'm going to say. The whole group says what it's going to say. And then the chair says, now, does anybody want to comment from the public? And half the time, nobody says anything. I mean, it's a dead silence in most cases. I'm probably one of the most talkative persons in the public comment on both the Board of Supervisors and on the boards that I'm on. And I feel alone sometimes because it doesn't seem like an environment in which you're encouraging the public to comment.
All right, so let me comment on that comment. So it's before, during, it's the discretion of the chair to decide, is
What
it
is
going to be before or during? And I prefer that it's before because that makes public comment usually briefer. You're getting their input. They may have come to your meeting because of that agenda item. You get their perspective, then you get whatever, maybe you'll get a presentation, maybe you'll get some discussion from your board members. So you're getting it, you're making sure that they have that opportunity. And I prefer before because it usually makes the meeting flow better, but it could be during. You could allow it, some of the boards and commissions, they're able to, and especially in the smaller communities, allow the public to really be part of the discussion. You know, when they do the public comment, they're really open to that. Oh, yes, Benny.
Just Benny Benavides from Imperial County, just to comment on Warren's concern there. The AG, the Attorney General, is actually the enforcing entity that enforces Brown Act violations. Of course, the DA is also in there, but because the AG makes a decision, it's usually ruling or it takes precedence over what's being. So it's probably not law, but it's what's going to be enforced. And you know, all entities do that. You know, there's certain laws that aren't necessarily enforced.
Kaylin, go ahead.
I don't know if anybody else on Zoom is having this issue, but just as an FYI, I'm still on the slide, like what's facing my screen, running a good meeting 1 through 3, with 3 being housekeeping. I'm not sure if you're on a different slide, but it sounds like you are, just as an FYI.
All right, let me share screen and make sure we're on the same page. So are you on teleconference allowances now?
Now I am. Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. Thank you. All right, so let's move on. Running a good meeting, rules, motion. So this is the basics of motions. A member makes a motion to propose an action. I mean, usually it's very simple for a board and commission, an advisory board, you know, the minutes are often voted on from the prior meeting. So you find agreement that the minutes from the prior meeting were accurate. Or when you make a recommendation, that would be a good time to do a motion. There are some boards and commissions, they do motions for lots and lots and lots of things, but I recommend as few motions as possible so you don't have to do these votes. Because you are an advisory board or commission. So the motion usually is sparked by the chair. They'll ask, do I hear a motion? And then they'll ask, do I hear a second? If they do hear a motion, a member will say, I motion to do this. I motion to approve the minutes as presented. And then somebody else will say, I second that. If you don't hear somebody say second, if you're the chair, you say, do I hear a second? And you'll hopefully get a second for that. If you don't hear a second for a motion, then there's no vote on that motion. Just move on with your meeting. Discussion, there should be a moment, just pause and see if there's any further discussion for that item. A lot of times, you know, that subject matter has been discussed, but find out if there's anything else. Make sure that board and commission members have a chance to say what they want to about that motion, and then take your vote. Yes or aye, if in favor, no or nay if against, and abstain means you're not voting. That can be, you know, sometimes people have a conflict of interest on something, so they should abstain. And if a member has a conflict of interest about an item that you're voting on, it's even better for them to leave the room so they're not influencing you with their like facial expressions or anything like that. Just stay away from a vote that you might have some type of for some reason why you shouldn't be involved in that vote.
Question?
Another question?
Hi, Gina Lewis, Alameda County. My question is suggestions for addressing members of the board or the chair that accepts a I motion as a motion without the definition of what their actual motion is for. So approval of the minutes with the date, or disagreeing or pointing, you know, extending the conversation or discussion. But just saying, I motion, to me is not a motion, because we don't know what you're motioning on. There is an implied understanding because we just had the minutes and you are making the motion for approval of the minutes, but that's still open for discussion because I motion is not telling me what we are actually voting on. And my question is recommendations after you brought that up once or twice, how to address it politely.
Okay. Yeah, and there may be some members, they just have a hard time with the words, you know, they're like, I don't know how this protocol works, but and the last item here on this slide at the bottom, it says chair makes sure that members know the motion. So that is an issue, you know, make sure people know what they're voting on beforehand. So you could ask one of the things that you could do, if it's just minutes, you could say, do I hear a motion to approve the minutes as presented? And then Gregory could say, yes, I make that motion. And that's all they need to say. So you've made it really easy for them to make that motion. Or if maybe there's a recommendation that your board has been working on and you have a draft recommendation, you could ask the staff to put it up on a screen and then maybe even have staff or the chair read that recommendation. And then the chair could say, do I hear a motion to approve this recommendation? So you make it easy so they don't have to come up with all the words.
If a person has been on your board for a certain amount of time, say 3 meetings or more, they should understand what a motion entails. And the chair should try to move us forward in a politically correct environment in helping them find the words. Staff helping them find the words by putting something on the board or on the screen, whatever the opportunities for use of technology allow for. So again, how do we address that? Not to create an adversarial relationship, but in the spirit of harmony, but also in clear communication. What do we do?
Right. If you need to clarify, if you know repeatedly that member is not being clear with their motion, but you think that you know what it is as chair, you can clarify and you can say, I understand your motion to be this. So you restate what you understood the motion to be. Okay. All right, we have Kaylin.
So this came up the other day. If there is a roll call vote, I believe I read somewhere in my welcome packet that if during discussion afterward, if new information comes up, that you are able to do a revote. But then that came into question at my last meeting. So I'm just curious, after a roll call vote, if there's new information, are you able to revote?
So yeah, that would be really odd for you. I mean, usually that topic is done and you've moved on to another agenda item. So it would be odd it would be out of order to be discussing that agenda item again during that meeting. But if new information comes up, that could be agendized at another meeting and you could vote on something again. That makes sense?
Kind of.
Kind of. Yeah. Well, this is why you generally for motions, you're giving people the opportunity to discuss a topic, you're getting presentations, you make sure the public has chance for public comment. And then the motion usually takes place after all that happens. there's a motion, there's a second. And then there's opportunity again for that discussion of board members. So you've already provided those opportunities. You shouldn't at that moment be getting new information. You should have gotten all the information.
Got it. I think this was a very specific instance and probably not best questioned at this particular forum.
Okay, all right. And there's another question in the room.
Hi, Marian Villalba, Napa County. I'm fairly new too. I've been on the board for at least a year, but I'm assuming all of this information is within your county's bylaws. Is that correct on how they do motions, on how they do, is that something that's not in the bylaws?
No. Yeah, it's not in the bylaws. A lot of the bylaws will refer to a specific parliamentary procedure, like Robert's Rules of Order, Rosenberg's rules, or Roberta's rules, or I think even there's some other rules out there. So that's why we put this slide together. This is kind of a generic way of doing it, that's very similar to what you would see in those rules. Yeah, the bylaws generally will have just information on the, like this, it'll incorporate what the state requirements are for your board or commission, but and it will say that they're subject to the Brown Act within the bylaws. And they may specify Robert's rules or Rosenberg's rules, but it doesn't go into the details of the rules and the bylaws.
This is JD, Chair for Solano County Behavioral Advisory Board. I just want to be clear, because Gregory said something. There is no motion to be made on public comments. Am I correct?
Correct.
We should not be making no motion, no second or anything on public
Yeah,
comment, correct?
yeah, no
Thank you.
back and forth on those.
Thank you.
And there's something in the chat. Motions have to be spelled out. Yes, thank you, Monica. All right. Oh, yeah, there's more. Okay. All right, we'll go to Gregory and then Laura online after
Okay,
Gregory.
let's be clear. There's two kinds of public comment in most meetings that I've been at for the long. One is public comment on the things not on the agenda that are within the subject matter of the board itself. Usually they stick that at the very end, or even at, several hours later. The Board of Supervisors in my county has at 1 o'clock and 3 o'clock and various places on their agenda that topic. So people can come and just raise issues, and they don't vote on those things. The board, it's not an agenda item. And so the board says, we aren't going to comment on those things. What I'm talking about is public comment on the agenda items that are on there. When there's an agenda item and the chair of the board says, okay, we've heard from everybody on this board. Now let's open it to public comment, and public comment comments on that item. Now you're voting on the item, not on the public comment. The comment just says, I think you ought to vote for it or against it, and here's the reasons why, just like all of us will say. So it's just a chance, it's an opportunity to let the public be us, talk about the issue in a public comment thing, and we're just hearing it, and it may influence us or not. So items on the agenda, no, we are voting for I'm taking the public comment into consideration when I vote on something, if it's on the agenda. If it's not on the agenda and it's in the thing about, hey, come on down, harangue us on anything you want. No, you have no obligation to say anything on that.
Thanks. Laura? Laura Griffin? You're on mute.
Okay, sorry guys. My question go back.
We're getting some feedback.
Yeah, let me get rid of this. Okay, is that better?
Yes.
My question goes back to the disability law that was just passed.
Yeah.
And sorry to have to go back, but I was doing something else. What defines a disability? Because is it physical? Is it mental? I've already had several commissioners telling me, oh, this is great. Now I don't have to come in person because I have PTSD. So how do I control that? I mean, at this point now, our county council is reviewing and will give us some further feedback on it. But is there anywhere that defines what disability is?
Right. Yeah, they were not specific when I read through this. And it just said temporary or permanent disability. So I think it's just up to the reason of your members. And, you know, I don't think we should put it on you or on the staff to decide whether it's valid. It's up to your members to say, because of my disability, I'm going to take this allowance.
Okay. Okay, I'll push it back to the Board of Supervisors.
Yeah, and yeah, when we have people in the room saying, you know, ask county council, and county council is probably going to vary county to county,
Yeah.
but you can ask them.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure. Jamie?
Yeah, to that comment, I'm from the city of Berkeley. We have an ADA officer, so if a person has expressed that they have a disability, I refer them to them, and then they handle it, and then they'll respond to me and let me know that they meet the qualifications of having a disability and that they need a certain accommodation. So that has been helpful, that I don't have to take it on, and then they
Right.
make that decision.
Okay, yeah, that's helpful. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to handling disruptions in meetings. Staying on agenda is one tool that, you know, you can use, you know, that's your, for the chair, that's their job, is to stay on agenda and make sure that you're focused on the items that are on the agenda. And keep in mind that the action is in the reaction. So people have opportunity for additional action if you react to them. If you do not react to them, if you just quietly move on, they don't have that opportunity. You have moved on, your group has moved on, the discussion has moved on, your next presenter is on, or, you know, the next speaker, you know, the next board member gets a chance to speak, or whatever that next item is. So quietly move on to the next person or agenda item. You know, for some people, it's easier to get them to stop talking if you don't have any back and forth discussion with them. You know, if you do have yourself or other members that are adding to their discussion, they're going to keep going. So, you know, it's partly trying to model that with your membership. And when you bring in new members, to talk to them about that, you know, to show them, you know, the conduct slide, and make sure that people understand not only that we have to abide by the Brown Act, but we also need to get through a meeting. We can't monopolize conversations. And we'll have many, many more meetings where we can discuss these items and other tools in order to work on them. And then another thing is, as when I was chair locally and state on, you know, state councils and local commission, and also sometimes I'm also on a statewide coalition. You know, sometimes people are so passionate about certain topics that it really does take more time than your meeting will allow. And taking the time outside of the meeting, if you're chair, to connect with that person, to just pick up the phone, talk to them, even if it's like an hour-long conversation, make sure that they have the opportunity to fill you in on what those items are that they care about. And do it between meetings. So at least they know that you care and that you've listened. But that can cut back on how much they're going to talk during your meeting. That can be a tool. And then also, if you find that there are members that they continue to monopolize and are difficult, and for some people, you'll see them jumping from topic to topic. They have a hard time organizing their thoughts, but they're passionate and they take up a lot of time. That might be somebody that you might alert the Board of Supervisors not to reappoint. That is something that's disrupting your meeting and it's not working. Yeah,
This
you have
is,
a comment.
this is Bill Stewart from San Diego. So what helped me as chair, and we have a large board, it's 22 members. At the beginning, I mentioned, or I request that keep it to one question for the presenter. And if we have time, we'll open it up if time's permitted, but also keep it a question and limit or just try not to have comments. Because a lot of people want to speak in comments and forget to ask the question. So they take up a lot of time, and that seemed to work for me in San Diego.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yeah, Warren?
Thank you. Warren Cushman, Alameda County. So to me, it's more about issues than it is about one individual. My perception, at least, is that there are two main issues that are challenging for our board. One is the tension between folks who support prevention and early intervention and the folks who support serious mental health challenges. Those two are challenging each other at certain points. And we had this discussion earlier, so I won't belabor it, but it's certainly one place of creative tension. The other point that I think I'm noticing on our board is some tension between members of our board who are strongly supportive of diversity and those who are less supportive of diversity. And so that also creates some tension. Thank you.
Oh, we have another, okay.
Gina Lewis, Alameda County as well. So I'm going to say in support of what Warren said wholeheartedly that we need to address those on our individual boards, but I'm hoping with the stakeholder engagement criteria that the state has given us, that we will embrace that. And people will use that to further their issues or concerns for diversity on their own boards.
Yeah, thank you. Those are, yeah, thanks, Gina. I appreciate you bringing that up. Yeah, it is the role of staff to make sure that all of those diverse stakeholders are included in the planning process, and for your board or commission to ensure that that happens. So that's law. So want to make sure that people know that. And then in terms of, some people, well, I think we're all passionate about prevention and early intervention, and serious mental illness and substance use, and those are all topics that are under your jurisdiction. So finding ways to make recommendations on all of those is important. If you have members that they're concerned because of the changes, because of the Behavioral Health Services Act, that's understandable, and that can be part of discussion. But hopefully they're not holding up your meetings. We need to find tools and ways to make recommendations. That's where you need to try to be directing the conversations, and the agenda items and the next steps for them. And again, if they're monopolizing the meetings because of their concerns, or if they're going back and forth with each other, saying, well, no, PEI should be their priority and no, SMI should be their priority. That's not helpful. You know, that doesn't help you make recommendations. I think all of it is a yes, we need all of it. Jamie?
Yeah, so I don't know if you're gonna talk about this a little bit more, or you did talk about it, but Jamie works right from the city of Berkeley. I'm a staff member, secretary. And with this new Prop 1 and the new requirements, does the recruiting or trying to gain the membership fall on staff, the board? Are we doing it to collaboratively to make sure that we meet all the criteria of all the new requirements? And January 1st comes, what happens if we don't have all those pieces filled in?
Good questions. Yeah, so yeah, you know, it does fall on the county to meet those requirements. It's state law, and the counties, if they want to have the funding for Medi-Cal and for the Behavioral Health Services Act and for their federal grants, they need to have this board or commission in place, and it needs to meet these requirements. So oftentimes staff can help, and sometimes boards of supervisors are engaged in recruitment, but that's not usually the case. Usually what works best is if the board members themselves, roll up their sleeves and kind of look out at, what do they need to do in order to recruit. So we have I think we have a slide coming up to talk about recruitment. Yeah, another question in the room.
Gregory Ferentz, Sonoma County. I think the two issues that Warren raised are exactly what I'm proposing for my county addresses them, and let me tell you how. Diversity is something that isn't, expanding the number of people who are on your board or the number of people who participate or the number of groups, in my opinion, helps both diversity and the kind of cross-board conversations that I'm trying to engender. Many of the people on our board have sort of tangential relationships with other boards. They have people they know or conversations. They kind of know what's going on the other boards, but they don't really have integrated conversations about the issues. And so having more people on our board and having, as you pointed out in one of the other slides, opportunities for conversations about what's happening on other boards, I think is going to inherently diversify the group. It is going to bring in people from other topics, other issues. And in my county, that tends to be a whole lot of folks who don't have power right now and are going to those new boards to try to gain a little more control over the services. The other thing is early intervention versus, folks with serious is an issue across every group that I know. In the homeless community, they're really concerned about, permanent supportive housing, meaning the end of we're going to get them into housing, versus groups who really just want to make sure that the 3,000 people out there on the street don't die and have, food and access. And so it's a question of a choice. It's a budget choice, because all of these are driven by the fact that either MSHA or, continuum of care is pushing us in one direction or the other. And we're having to choose between prevention and early intervention.
I need you to finish up.
Okay.
It's almost noon.
Okay, all right. So I guess what I'm saying is there's some solutions in diversity. There's some solutions in cross-program budgeting, because we can have it all if we in my opinion, if we organize all of the budgets and all of the opportunities for spending money, and not just simply sit in our silos and have the same old people trying to talk about the same old issues.
Thank you. Yeah. Let's move on to the recruitment, and it's getting close to noon now, I think. So we're going to need to be finishing up. I wanted to mention in the best practices handbook, page 20, we have some information on recruitment, including a sample membership guide. So we recommend that you would put together a membership guide for your board and commission members, and include like your bylaws and just information to help them understand what the procedures are for your board and also what your duties are. And then we have some strategies, and I can talk about process. And one of the things I want to remind you is membership requirements. And we talked about this earlier, you know, just keep this in front of your board members and leadership and staff so they remember what the requirements are. Because over time, people forget. It's a lot to look at the Welfare and Institution Code. So on the last page of the best practices binder, we have this listed out so you can see each of the categories that are required for membership. The consumer and family members, board of supervisor member, employee of a local education agency, veteran or veteran advocate, reflect the diversity of the local client population, and then have individuals with experience and knowledge of the mental health system. You know, there's more information too as well. And there are some exceptions so that a board member or their spouse should not be employed by the behavioral health service, the Department of Healthcare Services, or the local behavioral health contract or a behavioral health contract agency. But then there's an exception to that. So there are allowances for people with lived experience. They can be employed by those above those groups that I just listed, as long as they are not somebody that has authority over financial or contractual matters. So they can't be like the executive director, the CFO of that organization. Then in terms of recruitment strategies, we say be intentional. Make sure that you're approaching groups that need to be represented. Say you're in a population area that has maybe 50% Hispanic population that are being served by your behavioral health agency. You need to find people that are Hispanic to be on your board or commission. And you might go to, like, there's Hispanic Chamber of Commerce in some communities, or community centers. Sometimes religious institutions like churches could have recommendations. Your county may have actually connections to some of these organizations through their own stakeholder committees that they run, and you could attend their stakeholder committee meetings and meet like the leadership of different groups, and have a coffee or a phone call with them, ask them if they're interested or if they have members that are interested, that could help, so that you can make sure that you're reflecting the diversity of your community. Another question?
Gina Lewis, Alameda County. I have a question with regard to the veterans groups.
Yeah.
Spouses, children of, are they going to qualify as?
Yes.
Okay. And even though they're, I'll leave that alone.
Yeah, yeah, they do. Okay, Monica?
Hi, yes, I just earlier I had put in if anyone was from San Joaquin that I wanted to reach out to that individual, and no one responded. So can you send me some information on the rep from San Joaquin?
Yes, yeah, I can do that. What I'll do is, I will email her your information if that's okay.
That's fine.
Okay, I'll do that.
And what is her name?
Pat Barrett.
Pat Barrett?
Yeah, it's Patricia.
Okay, is she chair or what's her role?
She's chair.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay, another
Comment.
question in the room?
Yeah, it's not a question, it's just a comment. As we're looking for specific types of people, for example, a youth member or an educator, it is appropriate for your flyer to be targeted specifically for that. I know our county will be posting an opening, and I asked them specifically that opening should be for an 18 to 25-year-old person with lived experience. So, and I'm working with Marion to create a flyer that's different than what I would normally put out, so that it's more attractive to younger people, and rather than having all of this information on the flyer, having links so they can connect to that information. But you know, so it's okay to say we're looking or immediate family members, because we do have requirements for certain numbers of these people. So I'm just noting that you can be targeted in terms of what type of person you're looking for.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. Oh, it's okay. Right, yeah. So, yeah, the listing that suggested process that we have here and that's in the best practices handbook would be, of course, public posting of the openings, an online or printed application available, have the chair executive committee review the applications, and then those that are qualified that meet the requirements, and have them interviewed by 2 or more of your members. And they can decide if they would like to recommend to your board to make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. So if it, sometimes that interview can be really important. It could be just a half hour. Have us, we have some suggested questions for you, just to learn, why they're interested in being on the board or commission, what their background and experience is. And then also you can determine, is this somebody, are they going to help us with making sure that we're meeting the requirements of our board or commission? And also you will find out, are they somebody that would be a good member? You can tell sometimes, I mean, within the first 10 minutes, certainly within the first half hour, if somebody is not going to be a good member of your board or commission, because they may be jumping from topic to topic, not organizing their thoughts. They might be passionate advocates, but they may not be great on a board or commission, because you'll see that behavior play out during your meetings and it won't work so well. So people that are just on a soapbox, and they don't seem to care what the other board members care about, or they may not be as interested in process. They might not be the best members. And then let's see. So after the interview, you would conduct a vote. So the folks that did the interview might make the recommendation that that person be recommended to the Board of Supervisors, and then notify the board, if that is approved by the board, notify the Board of Supervisors about that recommendation. And that can really encourage the Board of Supervisors to go forward and get those appointments done. Yeah, one more, a question in the room, Gregory?
feels a little uncomfortable. Somebody comes, they attend our meeting, and can't apply to share, but we ask them to leave the meeting so we can vote on whether or not they recommend it.
Okay, yeah. Gregory recommended doing it with the executive committee, and I think that's a good recommendation. Have the executive committee make their recommendation to the Board of Supervisors.
You guys decide whether or not I should. They're looking for the recommendation. So, but it's not the full Board of Supervisors. The board, maybe it's just like this, in our county, the Board of Supervisors doesn't go to the whole.
Right.
Individual.
Okay, right, yeah, that varies county to county. We're gonna need to finish up the slides here, so let me just touch on the member orientation slide. Oh, let me look at the chat first. Oh. Okay, maybe that mic might be out. Okay, all right, is mine still working? Yes, mine's still working. All right, so member orientation, we really encourage that. You can meet with new members, you know, as long as it's less than a quorum, you can have meetings, you know, have a couple. If you have a lot of new members coming on, have a couple of training orientations and review their duties, make sure they understand the Brown Act requirements, show them your past work, such as your annual report, and review the bylaws and policies. And we recommend putting together a membership guide for them. So we have a sample guide provided on our website that even has sample policies that you might want to adopt. We also recommend that you provide our information from Cal BHBC, provide, you know, the information on our training page and resources page so that the commission members can see, you know, the duties and all of the resources that we provide. All right, so annual goals and task list. We actually talked about this already. You know, setting aside time every year to talk about what would be the main priority issues that you want to work on. And then aside from that, a task list is just, there are so many different tasks that, you know, you need to make sure happen during the year, such as, you know, nominations and elections and things like that. And annual reports, making a schedule of site visits, and setting agendas. So we just have a listing of things to keep in mind, and the administrative liaison and the executive committee need to keep these in mind and maybe calendar them so that they make sure that they get those onto the agendas at the right time of the year. So I think we made it through the slides, and I think it's probably past 12. What is it? 12:05. So I think it's time to close up, but thank you all and appreciate your time. Appreciate that you're serving on or supporting one of the local boards and commissions, and please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you need support. Really appreciate the work that you all do. Everybody take care.